up on this week's show, the Atari 2600 beats modern AI.
How to save your broken PlayStation.
A WeChat, Sony and Warthog with Phil Gaskell.
And the Retro Hour podcast is brought to you each and every Friday with our sponsor, our great friends at Bitmap Books. Now, have you seen their latest volume, Hurt Me Plenty, the ultimate guide to first-person shooters, covering the years 2003 to 2010, the blockbuster era of FPS games, covering all the massive games we remember from that era. Half-Life 2, Doom 3, Call of Duty's in there as well, and weighing in at more than 460 pages. A real love letter to first-person shooters. You can check it out in the rest of their retro gaming collection at bitmapbooks.com. And with our friends at PCBWay. Now, PCBWay, an incredible company who offer fully featured custom PCB prototyping, low-cost, fast turnaround quality boards, and they do services like 3D printing and injection molding. So maybe you're working on a retro project over the summer. Check them out and also have a look at their shared project section as well on their website and get an instant quote for yours at PCBWay.com. Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 485, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
Me, Ravi Abbott.
And me, Joe Fox.
And great to have you joining us for the podcast that every single Friday celebrates everything about the wonderful world of retro gaming and technology and brings you more veterans of the industry onto the podcast for a chat about their career on an interview in the second half of the show. Speaking of which as well, you may have noticed something a little bit different about the interview that we did last week. There was a video version of it out there, Ravi.
We've actually upgraded and got a video camera. You know, it's funny, we've done audio for so long. It's our kind of primary format. And yeah. I think, you know, going to video seems like a huge thing for us, but it's pretty standard now, isn't it? For most podcasts. And, you know, a lot of people actually just put videos out and say, this is a podcast now, where we're very traditional in the sense of podcasts. We do audio, but we have been putting the interview out in video, which is, you know, it's gone down really well. I think it really adds to the interview.
100%. So, like you said, Ravi, we'll always be an audio-first podcast because we know that's vast majority of our audience, obviously, on Spotify and iTunes, that kind of thing. But yeah, if you, we've had a YouTube channel that's kind of been neglected, really, for the last 10 years. We just kind of shoved the audio up there, but we are actually starting to put full video versions of the interview section of the podcast on there now, so you can watch it. Video does seem to be the way the industry is going, so if you want that extra dimension, of course, we'll still keep doing the audio-only version as well, so nothing changes if you are an audio listener, but if you want to check out the YouTube videos, you can join our YouTube channel. I'll put the details in the show notes. Now, we have got an incredible guest on an interview this week in the show. We're going to be going inside the world of Sony at a very interesting time, Psygnosis as well, and then later, Warthog, with our guest, Phil Gaskell.
Yeah, this is a really interesting interview because Phil kind of joined Sony just before the PlayStation launch.
Yeah.
So that's a huge period, and he was doing QA. So he was checking out the games, you know, seeing how they all work with the new hardware, but seeing what was coming in as well. So it's really interesting. He says the only game they were really aware of at the beginning was Alone in the Dark. But he really wanted to get a job at Psygnosis, you know, huge company. It was in his area as well. But he kind of got there later, and that was during the Sony acquisition of Psygnosis as well.
Yes, I mean, it's just interesting to kind of hear about what the atmosphere was like at Sony and kind of the run-up to the launch of the original PlayStation. And then, he was working in QA, wasn't he? So testing some of the early titles and some that didn't actually make it to market that we hear about as well. Then worked on some IPs, including a lot of Warner Brothers.
Yes.
Assets like, you know, Tiny Toon Adventures, Animaniacs, Tom and Jerry he worked on as well. So, which actually, Tom and Jerry in House Trap was quite a unique game, wasn't it? A kind of like 3D comic strip layouts and a dual screen.
Spy vs. Spy style, and that was when he went to Warthog as well. You know, they did Privateer 2 The Darkening, which absolutely loved. Very different company, and then they got taken over by Gizmondo, and some very interesting stories from that period, because we all kind of have heard some tales of the history of the Gizmondo and how it was funded and stuff. So that's really interesting. And then he went into the J2ME, which was Java hitting the phones, but with a lot of licenses from Sega. So stuff like Sonic the Hedgehog, Virtua Tennis. He was doing a lot of the Dreamcast games at the time. And then he went back to Sony.
Yeah.
And did Super Stardust HD, which is a huge title, and Lemmings as well, starting with that. And then now he's at Ripstone.
Yeah, runs his own company now.
He founded, yeah.
And it's actually the new game they're working on is a follow-up to one of my favourites, a game called Pure Pool, which is an incredible pool simulator. I was actually playing it on holiday last week on my Switch on my balcony in Spain. Awesome game. Actually doing a new, really gorgeous-looking version of that for current-gen systems, of which you can wishlist now on Steam. Pure Pool Pro, so I'll put that in the show notes as well. So he's got a really interesting history. So our special guest this week, Phil Gaskell, he's going to be on the show in around half an hour from now. But of course, first half of the podcast is when we have a bit of a geek out about what's been happening in the world of retro from over the last week. And a little reminder that we do have a Discord for this podcast as well. We're going to be talking more about Discord in a bit, actually, and how you can access it on Windows 95. So maybe you're going to join it from there. But we do have a little section in there where you can submit news stories. And the first one this week was actually sent to us by Ben One Music. So thank you for your submission. Where we're starting this week then, Joe?
So, do you guys use ChatGPT much?
Only every day.
I know you do. I know me and Ravi don't use it.
I use Grammarly, which is kind of like corrects your text and stuff like that, but it doesn't go as deep as ChatGPT.
I pay for the 20 quid a month version. Yeah, I get a lot of use out of old ChatGPT.
I know you do. You get it to work everything out.
Yeah. I had to sit back all day.
What am I doing today, ChatGPT?
Tell me how to have fun.
Well, I'm not going to use it to play chess by the looks of it.
Well, yeah, this is the thing. As intelligent as it may be, apparently it can't beat Atari 2600 chess. So a Citrix software engineer, Robert Caruso, has taken to LinkedIn, of all places, to share his experience of getting ChatGPT to play against Atari 2600 chess, which I think is quite funny. And I'm not entirely sure how he got them, how he hooked it up or anything, or if he was just typing in what was happening.
Well, it looks like what he did. He used an emulator on his PC called a Stellar emulator, and then he screenshotted the Atari's moves and then fed them into ChatGPT.
Okay, that makes sense. So apparently ChatGPT actually offered to play it because he was talking to it about chess, and somehow they got onto the subject of chess in video games, and it offered to play a game of it against the Atari apparently. And it got its ass handed to it, essentially. Yeah. It took 90 minutes, the game did, but that was mostly because ChatGPT was getting confused with what the pieces were, like getting bishops and rooks all, muddled up and swapped around, and it was losing track of whose go it was, and it was losing track of where pieces were on the board. And apparently it was apologizing to him and saying it was because of the rudimentary graphics of the Atari 2600.
We've all used that excuse before when we're losing at games, haven't we?
Yeah, it couldn't understand the difference of the graphics and all this kind of stuff. So I'm assuming what he would do is, if he was playing it in emulation, was he just emulating the moves that ChatGPT, he would put in the moves that ChatGPT was putting into the Atari 2600 emulation, and then it would... Yeah, and then it would...
Almost like, back in the day when people used to play games of chess over the post and they'd write out the moves on letters, send it to each other like that, really.
Yeah. So, and I just found it so funny, and apparently he was on the beginner level, the easiest level, and it just couldn't win. And I'm interested to know why it couldn't win, if it just doesn't know how to play chess, or... Is the Atari 2600 version of chess just that good at it? Or is it just ChatGPT? Was it the way it was being fed into it? It's interesting.
Well, at the end of the day, ChatGPT, it's not made for that. It's a language model. So
a generative pre-trained transformer.
Yeah.
Which they're all designed to do different things. So you can get one that's based on the gym. And you go how do I get a six-pack? That's what I type in all the time. And then it will come up with a list saying, Ravi, you need to do all of these exercises, all of this kind of stuff. But there's different design GPTs. So I think the one that Dan's paying for is probably a lot more advanced. I don't know which one he used, and I think a lot of them are set to talk. So this title to me, it's a bit silly. It's a bit like, this versus this. It's not a fair pitched battle, I don't think, because I don't know if you had some heavy model AI, or you had a custom GPT for chess and then played it against that. I don't understand AI as much, but I do think it is a bit of a clickbaity kind of headline.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It does make a good headline that, a 1977 chess engine thrashed the world's biggest AI. But yeah, I mean, like I said before, ChatGPT, it's designed to make English language sentences. That's why it's bad at maths as well. If you feed maths equations into it, often gets them wrong. It's not made for that. But yeah, I mean, if you put it up against an AI designed for chess, I imagine even Deep Blue that beat Kasparov back in the 90s, that would probably thrash an Atari 2600.
But I think looking at this though, it shows how well the 2600 was programmed originally, and must have had quite a decent chess player in there programming the original Atari's AI. If it's still to that kind of level, it might just be because it's predicting predictable rules and ways of playing. So, ChatGPT does the predictable thing, and then the Atari's chess engine is set to do that. But pretty cool in 1978. But I also think chess, and we even talk about this in our interview, is a really interesting kind of game on the computer.
It would thrash me, the Atari 2600. No doubt.
I was in the county chess club when I was a kid.
When you as well, Joe, weren't you in a chess club?
I was in the chess club, and interestingly, there was a chess tournament at work a couple of months ago. And unfortunately, I actually made it to the top 4, and then because I was too busy with work and stuff, I never actually managed to play my final games.
No way.
But I was really pleased with myself. A lot of people entered. I don't know how many there was, but I had to play a lot of games of chess over the period of a few months, and I was like, "What's going on?" And then I beat the top guy, which was a complete fluke that I beat him. But yeah, I hadn't played in 10 years. So now I'm interested to try and play ChatGPT.
Can Joe beat ChatGPT?
2600. Yeah.
So yeah, as you said there, Ravi, it makes for a good headline. But yeah, I mean, it's no real surprise because it's as someone put in the comments on his LinkedIn post, it's like trying to repair a car engine with a jackhammer. You're not using the right tool for the job, which is very true. But
Fair enough.
Very cool. So I'll link that in the show notes if you want to check out more about that story. Another one submitted on our Discord as well. Thank you, Destroyed007. An engineer has created the first custom motherboard to save broken PlayStation 1s.
So yeah, this is an engineer called Lenitio Brodisco who has created the NS1, which is a custom motherboard for the original PlayStation. So I'll call it the PS1 for the sake of ease, but it's the bigger grey one, the one that came out in 94, not the one that came out in 2000, not the PS1 spelled O-N-E.
It gets a bit confusing on this, doesn't it?
Yeah, it always gets confusing. But yeah, this is the NS1, which actually stands for not Sony's one, which I thought was quite funny. And this is a answer to, obviously the original PlayStation is 31 years old now. They are failing, and, I get hold of quite a few and stuff with my mate Jason, and I'd say about half the time they don't work now. Various different issues on them when I get hold of them, and this is kind of like a original hardware answer to I guess the motherboard failing or particular parts on the motherboard, but it's a replacement motherboard without the chips, from what I understand. Yeah, but it is completely compatible.
Yeah, it's for transplanting. So, you take the chips out your old broken motherboard, put them in this one. Yeah. It works. Simple as that, but also it's manufactured by PCBWay, so it's available that way. He's doing a Kickstarter campaign on there.
Which has just ended. He raised over £6,000 on there.
Yeah, and I guess he's not breaking any laws or anything doing this because it's using the original one. He's not using any of the chips. It's just like the board layout. It fits in the original case quite well. Looks decent. I'm probably quite casual about this because we've had this in the Amiga scene for ages where people have recreated the boards and transplanting. I would say, though, the transplanting process is probably one of the hardest parts of this. Soldering on all those chips onto a new board.
Yeah, because it's all surface mount technology.
Yeah.
As well, by the looks of it, the ICs and stuff on there at least. But yeah, I think it's definitely valuable to have these because we know, from experience, there are machines that can be, if the capacitors start to leak, they can eat through traces. A lot of these are kind of multi-layer boards as well, so if any damage happens inside, then, the board can be written off. Obviously, you can do like bodge wires and that kind of thing. But I think having a nice new motherboard that you can basically shove the components on and have them up and running again, like they said, to save broken PlayStations.
And I was wondering why this hasn't been done for the PlayStation before, but I was thinking maybe there's so many around and, they're command a fairly small price, that they've not kind of needed to be replaced. But as they get rarer.
What's the going rate of one now, Joe? An original?
What? An original? About between 30 and 40 quid.
Yeah, okay. I saw the other day, apparently CX was selling a Nintendo 64, just standard model, nothing fancy, £150.
Really? Was it boxed?
So I wonder if that generation... I'm not sure about that. Yeah, it was just someone put it on us on Facebook the other day.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, so I'm wondering whether the price of these things is maybe starting to rise.
You can still get them for 20 quid some places, an old PlayStation. So.
Yeah, I think I picked my current one up it was chipped as well, for about 25 quid about 10 years ago. So, they did make a hell of a lot of them. That's the difference, I think, isn't it? If you're talking about stuff like the Amiga, they only made like 1 million out of them, Amiga 500s, whereas they made like tens of millions of original PlayStation. So there's definitely enough out there. But I think if you have got one that's broken, though, rather than just kind of keeping it for spare parts or binning it, I think it is nice if they can bring some back to life using this. So, looks really cool. So if you want to get hold of that, like I said, he did do a Kickstarter for them, but hopefully there will be some extra ones available as well. Always nice to see people rescuing broken hardware. So good luck with that. This next one's pretty cool as well. Now, this comes from a guy who actually did a port of the game Head Over Heels back in the day. Now, obviously Head Over Heels was a John Rittman and Bernie Drummond game. And incredible games they did on the Spectrum back then, and C64 it came out on as well. They did Batman before that, didn't they? Which we had John Rittman on the show, didn't we, in the early days?
Yes, we had him on episode 66.
Wow. Yeah.
Very early days, yeah.
Almost a decade ago. And I enjoyed playing Batman, because randomly that was the first Spectrum game I ever played, because I got a cover disc off an Amiga magazine that had a Spectrum emulator on there, and had actually put John Rittman's Batman just kind of on the cover disc as well. I imagine just kind of snuck it on, probably didn't get it licensed or anything. So I did enjoy playing that game back in the day, and we've covered kind of new ports of that in recent years as well. Really cool game, and Head Over Heels was the kind of the spiritual successor to it, a really interesting isometric game. But it got ported to the Amiga and the Atari ST back in 1989 by a guy called Colin Porch. Now, it turns out Colin, for the last, 36 years, he's actually been planning a sequel to Head Over Heels, which is about to get a full release, and he's actually bringing it out on the Amiga and the Atari ST, called Return to Blacktooth, a Head Over Heels adventure.
It's interesting because that's also coming through Thalamus Digital as well, that have been releasing a lot of titles recently, Roadcraft, and we also had Hoffman's titles going out there, and Atari as well, so seems to be a hookup with them too.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see this because you mentioned Atari there. He's bringing it out on the ST and the Amiga, but also Thalamus are going to be bringing it out on other platforms, including the Atari Jaguar.
Oh, apparently. You love that for your collection, and the Spectrum Next as well, and the original Spectrum. Yeah,
and the C64, and it says console, so I imagine that'll be like Switch, Xbox, PlayStation, and the PC as well. So pretty much everything.
Maybe Evercade.
Yeah, well, some people have speculated that that Evercade obviously announced that there are 3 remaining unannounced titles coming out this year. So some people are kind of speculating maybe this is going to be one of them. They might do like a head over heels collection on there, including the sequel, which would be cool. So yeah, I think it's great. I mean, at the moment there's a few screenshots that Thalamus have put on their X page. But yeah, nearly 40 years in the making. Looks very authentic to the original as well, doesn't it? So yeah, I'm excited about this as someone who was a fan of that game and, always love to get, like you said, new titles for the Amiga and my Jaguar as well. So yeah, definitely keeping an eye for this one. Expected to land in Q4. So hopefully out in time for Christmas this year. So as soon as pre-orders are available, of course, we'll let you know. But if you want to check that out post, I'll put that in this week's show notes as well. Now, the Dreamcast has been getting a load of love again recently. Didn't we declare like last year as the year of the Dreamcast? So there's that many new releases coming out all the time. Seems like it's continuing into 2025.
It should just be the decade of the Dreamcast now at this point.
It deserves a decade, doesn't it? Something I didn't think we'd ever see on the Dreamcast is Mario Kart 64. Now running on there at a buttery smooth 30 FPS.
Yeah, this is really cool. So Mario Kart 64 got decompiled not so long ago, which obviously we've been covering loads of N64 and GameCube games, etc. have all been getting decompiled and then rebuilt from the ground up, mostly to be them emulated. Well, not emulated, to be then played on PC. Emulation is a completely wrong word there, but to get them to run natively on PC. So what this guy's done, which is Jin Martin 84, has got the decompiled version of it, and initially just straight away just stuck it on his Dreamcast. I don't know what magic goes on there. And the original video that he kind of put out was it was running, but there was a lot of screen tearing, a lot of graphics kind of like going all over the place, like random 2D clouds, which are usually very far away in the background, stuff like that. Just kind of all over the place, all over the screen, backgrounds not quite lining up with the foreground and stuff like that. But it ran. But obviously he spent a lot of time with it over the last couple of weeks, and he's put a new video out with it running really, really nicely. And he's playing on the Wario Stadium and shows off the Luigi level on there as well. I can't remember what that's called. I want to say
Luigi Raceway.
I think it is. Luigi Raceway. But where you mentioned the 30 frames per second, what's pretty cool about it is on both of those levels, there's like a jumbo screen in the background, which originally, would show what, like not a replay, like a live feed, because the idea is if it's a race, on like a big racetrack, like a motocross or like a destruction derby kind of thing, and it's like, the big screen for the audience to watch. On the N64, that actually shows at 5 frames per second.
Right.
However, on the Dreamcast version, running on the Dreamcast, it's running at 30 frames per second, which is what the game is running at as well. As well as that, the toads in the crowds of the levels, using the little 2D animations, were also 5 frames per second. And I remember as a kid, thinking like, oh yeah, the graphics are great on this, but look at that crowd, like the 2D cutouts just kind of like moving up and down very slowly.
Yeah.
Whereas in this, it's all 30 frames per second and looks a lot nicer. But it also doesn't surprise me because it's the Dreamcast, which was obviously more powerful hardware than the N64. But what a lot of people are pointing out is it's like, oh my God, like a Nintendo game on the Dreamcast, like also a cartridge-based game on disc. It's just crazy to think what people are doing. No news whether he's put this out here for people to play.
Not as yet, by the looks of it. Yeah.
I suspect he probably won't. With Nintendo coming to, you know what they're like with their iron fist, but it's still very cool to see.
It looks buttery smooth if you watch the video as well. So I think that for me is kind of the big takeaway, how well he's got it running. And yeah, I mean, it's always interesting with these decompilations. And obviously we had stuff like, GTA, San Andreas, did a Dreamcast version of that, which, was out there. I mean, potentially he could release this, if you need the original cartridge, to kind of do the build, I suppose. That probably wouldn't be infringing any copyright. But yeah, I mean, that hasn't always stopped Nintendo in the past. All they need is like a cease and desist letter. That'd be enough to freak most people out, wouldn't it? So I can see why maybe it's not available to download yet. But it would be great if it did come out there, so for us to play. But at the moment, you can keep an eye on his YouTube channel. He's doing regular updates on there. But never thought I'd see the day though, Joe. Mario Kart running on the Dreamcast. So that kind of makes up for Sonic coming out on the GameCube, I think. That was a bit heartbreaking for Sega fans.
Good comparison, actually.
Yeah, there you go. So I'll link that up in the show notes as well. Now, another one that was submitted on our Discord by Gareth, Retro Hamer. Great part of our community. He's one of our staff members in our Discord as well. Does great work in there, keeping it safe and friendly for everybody. Well, he submitted this story in the new section on there, that you can now run Discord on your Windows 95 machine. Which I think so. Actually, I've been looking for something like this recently. So this is quite well timed. And this is from...
still using 95 regularly?
I do have a Windows 95 machine. But actually, I've been playing around with quite a bit recently. So I actually had I never know how to pronounce this. Is it MIRC or Merc?
Merc.
Yeah. I've
always said Merc, yeah.
I have as well. So, I actually had that running on there. The other day on an IRC channel, but that's the thing. I love IRC. I used to live on IRC back in the day. And today you go on most servers, you might find one with like a couple of hundred people on. Most of them just have people idling there, don't they? There's not a lot of conversation. Goes on.
It's very slow IRC nowadays, but it's really, really old. And
1987 it came out.
Yeah. And I can't believe we even still talk about IRC being used, but it is the basis of a lot of things. Discord behaves in a very similar way to IRC. We have an IRC Discord bridge, actually. So our Discord channel is also reflected on an IRC, and this is to do with Discord's APIs. So Discord is really awesome and open with its APIs and how it communicates with things. So on Libera chat as well, you go to hashtag Retro Hour, and that's our channel.
On IRC,
Yeah, on IRC. So the way that works is we have a bot that just takes the text and then it just transfers it onto the chat, and it does it vice versa. This is a lot more complex. This is putting it within a Windows operating system, and an old Windows operating system at that, creating a full program. So you have accessibility not just to the channels, but also to all these different IRC servers, to the chat servers. And it's pretty amazing what this guy's done. Matt Casey Bytes is his YouTube channel. And I've been trying to watch through the video of what he's done. And it looks like he's previously done a lot of apps that are modern apps, but got them working with older systems. And a lot of the way of doing that is kind of re-implementing technologies that it uses and libraries for like modern systems, but then kind of getting them to work on the older ones.
Yeah, he did a lot of kind of .NET framework stuff you re-implemented on Windows 95. Last year, actually, did a video called "I've ported thousands of apps to Windows 95," which was a really big video.
And changing DLLs as well, so that they work. And having this kind of mid-program within it that will be like a bridge, will like communicate with the modern API, but then be able to just display it in the old format. So what he's essentially done is he's created an app for Windows 95 that uses and works with Discord.
I should point out, Matt's done the video on this. He didn't actually make it, though. This is not one of Matt's programs. It's a developer called iProgram in CPP. So Matt's just done a video covering it, because obviously he's done stuff like this in the past. So it kind of fits in with his channel really nicely. And I'll put that video in the show notes, because it's a good explanation of kind of how this works. But really, I mean, like you said, Discord's APIs are there and open, but they don't actually officially support custom clients. He says in the video they technically violate the terms of service, but they tend to tolerate them as long as they're not causing any problems. And I imagine, they're not going to care too much about a Windows 95 app. But yeah, this is it's called Discord Messenger. And apparently this was inspired by a mock-up someone did. A guy called Mondi Spartan, who's an artist, who did a mock-up of what Discord would have looked like in like the year 2000. running on like old Windows, and then this iProgram.
It does feel very old school Discord. I've been on channels where they've had text adventures in there as well, like Zork and stuff, and you can go on there and actually play them as a group. There's loads of different functions you can do, and like having bots in there, I really love it.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy Discord as well, but it does feel a bit like the modern client does sometimes feel a bit heavy. And it annoys me that Discord is one of those apps where every time you open it, installing update 1 of 15. You know, it's always every bloody time. But so I'm interested to run this on Windows 95. Now, this program that he's made, Discord Messenger, originally the aim was for it to run on Windows XP, which it does. But now he's actually backported it so it works on Windows 98, Windows 95, and also Windows NT 3.1 from, I think, 1993 that came out.
I've got a bit of 3.1 nostalgia still.
Well, this is not Windows 3.1. This is Windows NT 3.1. Yeah, so came out a couple of years after. But yeah, really. So basically it runs on, you can run Discord now on every 32-bit version of Windows, they're saying. But to get it working, you have to do stuff like you mentioned, kind of backport and re-implement a lot of the modern protocols. For example, you can't use TLS on old Windows. So you backported OpenSSL to Windows 95 to get this working. A lot of runtime libraries you had to re-implement as well. So, I mean, it does go quite in depth into the technology of how we got it working. But really, you can run this Discord Messenger now on everything from Windows NT 3.1 up to Windows 11. It does work on modern systems as well. Supports text chat, emojis, image uploads, even user profiles. So there are some limitations, like modern fonts are not implemented if you run it on Windows 95. But for basic use, I mean, you probably won't get voice chat and all that working on there, I imagine. But yeah, it looks really interesting. It does mention in the video that there is another custom Discord client as well called AeroChat that actually mimics the look of MSN Messenger.
Oh, nice.
So if you want that kind of proper old school aesthetic, that could be worth a look in. And apparently it's really popular as well. They've got over 3,000 users in the AeroChat Discord server at the moment. So again,
I wonder how many of them are actually using AeroChat though.
Yeah. Or it might be like IRC, the oldest idler in there all day.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's awesome. I mean, I would love, I was actually looking for this recently. I was trying to see if anyone had made a Discord application for the Amiga or for MorphOS. It would have been great to go on there, but from what I've seen, nobody has. But the fact someone's got this running on Windows 95 does give me a bit of hope that maybe someone could do that.
Yeah, and if you just want to chat Retro Hour, you can join our channel and still communicate with someone on their mobile phone, and you could be on your old system.
Yeah, so always cool to see modern platforms running on retro tech. So if you want to get hold of that, I'll link it up. And of course, all the rest of the stories, you don't have to Google around. I'll save you the job every week by putting them in the show notes, or you can head through straight to our website at theretrohour.com. Little reminder as well that this podcast is supported massively by our patrons. We love our patrons community. We're chatting in Discord to them pretty much every day, aren't we? Always in the Bacchus channel on there. We do have another hangout coming up as well, end of the month, which is scarily only a week away now. Coming up next Sunday, 29th of June from 8 p.m. UK time. Hangouts are always such a giggle, aren't they? Oh,
yeah, absolutely love them. Yeah, we've had a lot of new people joining as well, and it's really good to see their collections and also hear about their history. It's good. It's a truly international bunch on there.
Yeah, and we do a bonus podcast as well for our gold members and above called the Retro Hour After Hours. Latest episode, we talked about our technology firsts, which is quite an interesting listen. Enjoy doing that one. So that's available now. And at the previous 46 episodes. And also we do a few extra news stories every episode for our patrons as well. So they're on the way in just a minute. So if you'd like to join our wonderful patrons community, all the details to join us right now are online at theretrohour.com. All right, now before we get into this week's special guest, going inside the world of Sony, Warthog and lots more, Phil Gaskell, he's on the way in just a second. Before we do that, let's take a moment to give a massive thank you to this week's sponsor. It is one of our longest running sponsors, our friends at Shopify. You know them. They're the ones with this sound. Which if you use Shopify, you'll love hearing that sound because it's basically the sound of making money with Shopify. And if you haven't used them before, I mean, Shopify is the all-in-one commerce platform designed to start, run, and grow your business, particularly if you're at that stage where you're maybe just starting a side hustle or maybe setting up your own company at the moment? Obviously, there's a lot that you need to do at the start. You find your to-do list grows every single day, new tasks that can quickly begin to overrun your life. But finding a tool like Shopify just simplifies everything. We found it a complete game changer for selling our books on there, didn't we?
Yeah, I love setting it up, actually, because it did a lot for us. You can select different regions and you can have the different postage costs in there as well. And then that just really simplifies the process. But also, you can set up discount codes. You can do all sorts of offers as well on the takeout and checkout facilities.
Yeah, and even digital delivery as well. We did like ebook versions of the books. It delivers them automatically. Didn't have to do anything. It's just such a time saver. And Shopify is a commerce platform powering millions of businesses around the world, including household names, Mattel, Gymshark use it as well, to brands just getting started as well. One thing I love about it is there are hundreds of ready-to-use templates, all like, drag and drop, point and click, really simple. So it lets you make a beautiful online store. And obviously you can match it to your brand style and colours and fonts and look and everything as well. And packed full of helpful AI tools as well. They can really help you polish your product descriptions and your headlines, even get your photography popping as well, get it looking really beautiful, and get the word out there too. Shopify is almost like having your own marketing team working behind you, and they can do the email and social media campaigns. Wherever your customers are, Shopify's there as well. So if you sell anything at all, you're ready for Shopify. And of course, we've got you an incredible deal. If you want to give it a try, you can try it Shopify for just £1 a month. Now use our link, the note that we sent you, head to shopify.co.uk/retro hour. I'll put that in the show notes as well. Shopify.co.uk/retro hour. Check it out for just £1 a month. Give it a try and get ready to take your business to the next level today and hear a lot more of this. Okay, well, thank you for checking out the news on this week's show. I'll have more for you next Friday, of course. And next, get ready for an incredible interview that, of course, as I mentioned, you can watch on video as well. Head to our YouTube channel. I'll put that in the show notes too. We're going to be catching up with Phil Gaskell, going inside the world of Sony, Warthog, and lots more. He's our special guest next on the Retro Hour podcast.
You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and we're here today with Phil Gaskell, and we're going to be talking about a huge array of things that Phil's worked on. He was working at Sony doing Q&A for some of the original PlayStation games, PS1 games as well. He was also working at Warthog. Then he went on to mobile phone stuff, but some really interesting titles there, like Sonic the Hedgehog. That conversion, I remember, was really fantastic. And then later on, going back to Sony, but a few classic titles redone. So there was Lemmings, but Super Stardust HD as well, which was absolutely huge. How are you doing, Phil?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for inviting me on. It's an honour. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, it's good to have you on. And we've got a question that we always ask all of our guests, and that was, what was your first video game experience or kind of memory that you remember?
So we're going to go right back. My first computer that my dad bought me when I was about 10 years old was a ZX81. And in those days, if I wanted to play games, I had to type them in. I had to type them in BASIC. So along with the ZX81 came a couple of, you'll probably be able to research these little books, which often had like a starfighter on the front, or it might have had a weird pixel golem or something. And it was just maybe 30 or 40 pages of just basic programs you have to type in. And then once you put your effort in, you hit run, and you got to play your little game. Of course, more often than not, you had to debug it because you'd spell something wrong or put a comma in the wrong place or a semicolon instead of a colon. So my first experience was typing them in and playing them. But I remember the first game that I was able to load up was called Miner 49er. And
yes.
it pitched itself as having high definition graphics. I'm sure if you looked at it now, it'd look like you've got Vaseline in your eyes. But yeah, it was stuff like that. And I would go to friends' houses. Mum and dad had a friend. He was into his Spectrum, and I'd see the games he was playing on Spectrum. There was one that was like a Pac-Man clone, but you had to pick up light bulbs. So that would then make me think, oh no, I need a Spectrum now. ZX81's not where it's at. I want a Spectrum now. And then one of the earlier memories I have is we were on holiday. I think it was like Newquay or something like that. Whenever we're on holiday, I have to go into the game shops. Big hardcore gamer, always have been since the age of 10. And I remember perusing the game shops, and someone was loading Way the Exploding Fist on a Commodore 64. And you know when the loading screen loads, it just screamed, "Wire!" Oh my God. Jumped out of my skin. I had no idea what it was, just whipped my head around and thought, oh my God, that's brilliant. I need a Commodore 64.
There starts a life of never-ending upgrades.
Yes. Yeah.
So talk us through that then. So you got the 64. What kind of came next then? Tell us about some of the systems you had then.
Spectrum C64, then it was Atari ST, then the Amiga. Then the sort of console started to come out, and I was finishing college, going to uni, so I kind of fell out of it. Things. This is an interesting one. My dad actually won a PC on what was the breakfast show with Chris Evans?
The Big Breakfast.
Yeah, Big Breakfast. It was a big pink Vigeland PC. He was on. Wow. Whose watching line is it anyway? He won. The answer was Jilly Cooper, and he won this big pink Vigeland PC. He didn't want it. He didn't. He plays cricket and football, and he was actually a computer programmer at Pilkinson's in St Helens, but never wanted to touch a computer when he got home. It was just a job for him. So yeah, I got this Vigeland PC, and that got me back into games, X-Wing and TIE Fighter, and then the endless upgrades of, it's a DX266, I'm going to need to get a better chip, I'm going to need more memory, I'm going to need a new graphics card, oh God, the whole thing needs replacing.
Yeah, triggers broom in the end, isn't it? Yeah,
it is, yeah. My dad, we didn't have a lot in those days, so he would always make me sell the computer I had to buy the next one. I still have the original ZX81, but had to sell them all. So when I got into games and started to earn, the first thing I did was go back to retro shops and start to collect them again, get them back. They're not the originals, but they still meant a lot to me. So they're actually all packed up in the dungeon in our Ripstone Studios basement. And I'm just trying to build a little museum to display them all in the entrance corridor. And interestingly, I want to label them because I want people to understand how much they cost in those days. They weren't cheap. Right? People complain about, it's 500-600 quid for a PlayStation 5 Pro. These things were dead expensive back in the day. I remember going into
the 500 was like 400 quid when it came out over here. Yeah. In today's money, that'd be like over $1,000, I imagine.
Yeah. I remember being in a game shop in Bolton when I was at university and looking at the top shelf at the Neo Geo cartridges. And per game, it was like 300-400 quid for a cartridge.
I mean, kind of going back to, you mentioned then about, getting into like understanding how games were made. I mean, if we think back to like when you were on the Commodore 64 and the Amiga, how did you kind of develop an understanding of that then and kind of, beyond just being a games player?
I would always describe myself as a game designer. So I was always fascinated about taking them apart sort of structurally, working out why they're doing what they're doing, what are the beats, what are the, why has that been placed there? I'm the kind of person, I'll start a level, I'll turn the camera around, walk in the opposite direction, because I'm guaranteed there's some collectible behind me that the designers, put behind a crate. So I was always fascinated about the structure of them and why they were designed the way they were. I never really gravitated to coding. I did study it. I could never get my head around pointers and, indirect pointers and virtual pointers and stuff like that. But to break into games, so I started off after I came out of university, working in telecoms, a company called Mercury Communications. I think the later was acquired by Telewest and then Virgin. And I was programming telephony switches. And the HR lady was friends with my boss. She came over one day and told him she was leaving and she was going to go and work in HR in Psygnosis. So those words immediately pricked my ears. I know Psygnosis. Would you take my CV with you, please? So she did, and she got back to me, bless her, and said, "Yeah, we've not got the experience. You need to know C and C++." And when I studied games at uni, I was the last cohort to study COBOL and not C. So the next cohort after me, they were all studying C, but I got left behind. And I think, ironically, you can earn six figures doing COBOL these days. It's such an archaic.
Not many games are made in COBOL, though, are they?
No. Some terrible databases. But so I went away and did a night course in C++, and got back to them and said, "Right, I know C++ now. Can I have a job?" And they weren't taking on, but they were taking on testers for Sony. So that's how I ended up going for interviews for Sony. But I mean, coming back to what you were saying around the creation of it, I would do a lot. I used to like taking colour packs and trying to draw them in D-Paint or Dagis Elite. That's kind of where I started to learn about the sort of creative side, the art side. And I knew enough about programming, still know enough to get by, but it's game design is where it's at for me.
I was wondering then, you said you joined Sony in QA. That period of time must have been crazy at Sony, because was it just after the PlayStation had come out and
just before?
Just before, so you were there on the kind of crest of the wave.
Yeah. I'm actually going to a reunion in September, so we celebrate 30 years, so the forming of the company. So I'm going to go and meet a load of old friends. But yeah, so we didn't have any dev kits, we didn't have any test kits, we didn't even know what games were confirmed coming out on the system. We were just a load of kids that love video games from the Liverpool area in the northwest that were about to embark upon doing testing for all PlayStation games. The only game we knew was coming out was Alone in the Dark. So we bought a load of copies of Alone in the Dark. We all just had to sit there all day, every day, complete it, write test plans for it, try and find bugs in it, even though it'd been out for a while.
Was it kind of a shock of the titles that did come out as the launch titles for the PlayStation? Because, not many people actually remember what some of the launch titles were back then.
I remember Ridge Racer, seeing that, yeah.
Yeah, Jumping Flash was my favourite. Bonkers, that game. I mean, but by the time we knew what was coming in, we'd formed our processes, we'd worked out how on earth we were going to do this. It was led by a great guy. He's not with us anymore, unfortunately. A guy called Tony Bourne, who used to be he was the QA manager at US Gold. So he was well versed, he knew what he was doing. But yeah, the rest of us, we had no idea what we were going to do.
I'm interested kind of, inside the company as well. Obviously Sony were pretty much a newcomer to the, making consoles. And at the time, with Nintendo and Sega being well established, do you remember much of the feeling about, were they really confident that the PlayStation was going to be massive? Obviously, it had been out in Japan before, but, any memories of that kind of, the pre-launch?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were all quite bullish, because it was an age where, 3D was starting to become popular. You had, games like Virtua Fighter, you had arcade games like Tekken, and we knew what the system could do. So, I mean, games like Wipeout, they were just capturing the spirit and we were a bunch of rebels, really, making up as we went along and just doing things a bit differently. So I think we were all, I don't think we ever thought it would be what it's become.
You must have had some confidence when Core Designs, Psygnosis, Reflections, all of these kind of companies started coming aboard. And with your previous gaming experience, you probably had a lot of reference to those.
For me, it was a dream come true. I got to go and visit a lot of them, go and see the offices of Core Design and speak to the founders when they were working on one of the Tomb Raiders. I think they did a ninja game. So that was in development. I can't remember the name of the ninja game, but I remember them developing it at the time. I got to go and see the offices where Quake was being published, GT Interactive were publishing that. I was in a Gothic church. It was mad. So yeah, it was for me, the first ever party that Sony held was at Namco Wonder Park. and all the arcades were on free play. I mean, as a kid growing up, one of my wishes that the genie in the bottle was going to give me was an infinite bag of 10p's. There it was. There on the table, everything on free play. Wow.
But you never wanted to leave.
No.
Well, going back to your job then in QA, what was kind of the process of testing and verification like of a title? And did you find like many weird things that you remember? Anything that sticks in your mind?
In the old days, it was split into two. So you had functionality testing. So you would generally, can you make it crash? Can you do things to it that will just make it break and do daft things? And then there was what we call the TRCs, the technical requirements. So they were much more about creating a consistent set of behaviors for all games. So the X button and the triangle button and the square buttons, they all had to do certain things forward and backwards in menus. You know, some of the funny things you would see people do is controller insertion tests. So in those days, they weren't wireless controllers. They plugged straight in. And so you hold the machine and just insert and remove the controller 100 times to see what it did. Same for the memory cards. So you had all these TRCs that they had to adhere to. But the fun stuff was always the functionality testing, was that sitting down and really trying to break it. These days, they don't do any of that anymore. You can patch your game pretty easily. So nobody really does the functional testing at the platforms. They just look at the TRCs. And games are more complex, so the TRCs have got bigger and bigger and bigger. I remember of all of the publishers, EA had a special deal. They had this with everyone. We had a contractual obligation to turn every submission to us round in 30 days. But we'd always do it in 2 weeks. We'd always do it in 10 days, 10 working days. EA, we only had 5 working days. That was the deal. And there was a game called Viewpoint came in. And I think it still today holds a record for the number of times it got failed. I think we got to some like 16 or 17 submissions and they just couldn't fix this crash bug. And I had one tester who, I'll guarantee you, he would find it every single time. It would drive the developers and EA mad.
Yeah. I was wondering, then with Psygnosis, you ended up moving to them, and had they been acquired by Sony at that time as well?
They had, yeah, but they hadn't really kind of absorbed them. The Psygnosis name still existed. Everyone still thought of themselves as Psygnosis there. They didn't think of themselves as Sony. It took quite a while before Sony Liverpool became a thing. I think they still use the Psygnosis name today as an accounting thing. But it still felt like Psygnosis. And yeah, it was exactly what I thought it was going to be. It was crazy. The smoking dope on the grass at the front. It's like the stories you hear were all true. I would rub shoulders with people who I'd heard these legends of, people like Kenny Everett and Gibbo and people like that. It was Dominic Mallinson. It didn't last that long in the end. I was there doing Cyberdeck, so I had my head down for 6 months. It was a bit of a difficult project. I kind of acquired something that it was 2 years late and 2 million too much. And it was that transition period where the creators of Wipeout were going off to set up things like Curly Monsters. There was a lot of change going on. So it feels like maybe I only had 6 months where it felt like Psygnosis before it started to change quite a bit.
Did it become more corporate at that stage then?
Yeah, it kind of. I don't think it was something that Sony did. I think it was just the type of people they brought in to run it. I think they somehow felt it should be run differently.
So what kind of titles were you working on initially there then? Because I know, obviously, there's, like any company, I imagine there was a few cancelled games at the time. Any that kind of stick in your memory that you can talk about?
Yeah. So there was 2. When we finished Cyberdeck, in those days, because you tended to keep the team together and you were kind of studio based. Our studio were starting to concept out what we wanted to do next. One of the programmers was working on a Bezier patch engine, so something that could do nice undulating hills, nice curved surfaces. I really loved Diddy Kong Racing. I liked this idea of mashing up racing, but narrative as well, and doing challenges, a bit like kind of Crazy Taxi, you know. So we came up with an idea called Carbuncle and Co. So you would play this spanky Carbuncle was this upstart kid who was running his dad's taxis. So his uncle's taxis, because his uncle had got his leg broken. And so we started to fill out all of these different worlds, all these different hub places where, you know, there would be characters. Don Key was one of them, based on Don King in the sports area. And so we started to design all the missions. I was quite excited about it. It was going to be a kind of a cool, like a Diddy Kong Racing adventure, but Sony's version of it. But then Speed Freaks was being developed over in London. So the London guys came over to look at what we were doing. That was it. Got canned about a week later. No, we're doing Speed Freaks. We don't need a game like this. So I got moved away to another project called Missionary. Again, quite an exciting one. It was how do I describe it? It took kind of Eastern kind of styles, sort of, you know, with swords and sort of cyberpunky kind of vibe, but mixed with Mad Max. The key kind of gameplay mechanic was we had these big land trains that would move across these huge areas, and you would have to climb in vehicles and you would have to try and attack these land trains. So we had this great AI system that would move vehicles in and out of a set of zones. So they jockeyed, all these smaller vehicles would jockey around the big vehicles. So again, started to build all the lore and the world building out. But that didn't last that long in the end. That got canned as well, as the studio started to get kind of restructured. And that's when I started looking around and thinking, I want to do something different. It's not happening here. So, and then I'd heard about Warthog. Warthog had taken people on, never heard of them, didn't know who they were, but went over for an interview. And they suddenly decided the producers were important. Let's get a producer. So they got me in.
Had you heard of Privateer 2, The Darkening?
I had, yeah. I'd heard of, and you know, but I had no idea who made it, and I didn't even know it was made in Warrington. So yeah, it was, and that period for me, I think, was where I felt the most creative and the most at ease. It felt like we were doing something amazing. We were in an old tithe barn. There was a little bungalow at the back. So some people were in the bungalow, in the various bedrooms. Some people were in the tithe barn. They got the posh desk. I remember getting into work one morning and going into the bungalow. And I said, "Can you smell gas?" "Yeah, I think we've got a gas leak. We're going to have to get everyone out for a while till we get the gas man in." And then another day, there was some rumblings under the floorboards of the bungalow, and it was the IT guy squirreling down under the floorboards, trying to lay more network cables because we were having more and more people coming in. But it just ripped properly the coalface of game development. It just felt really exciting and really different.
Must have been quite a contrast to coming from Psygnosis' plush offices. Moving there.
Yeah. Huge desks, massive windows. Yeah, an amazing kind of... that building they were in, at the end, I think it was built for Richard Branson's lottery bid that he didn't get. There's a big, huge, massive building.
With the big logo on the top.
To buy it. We nearly bought it because we just bought a new building ourselves at Ripstone. But yeah, it was just right at the top of our price range and it felt a bit big. But yeah, going to Warthog, it was the opposite end. It was completely the opposite. It was so exciting, so different, so sort of held together with blue tack and string. It was great.
So what did you think of Starlancer, and did you have high hopes for that title?
Yeah, I mean, Starlancer was an interesting one because it had so many people who were steering it. I mean, my job was just to produce it, just make sure it came out on time, make sure everyone knew what they were doing. That was what I was good at in those days. So I had no say in the design or anything like that. It was Erin Roberts was kind of creative director on it, but Microsoft were publishing it as well. So I think we used every single key on the keyboard for something. It was insane. We ended up doing a Dreamcast version years later, and we got all that functionality down to one Dreamcast controller. Just got rid of all the superfluous. Can we have a button for targeting missiles at frigates? Can we have a button for targeting missiles at fighters? It was crazy.
And it's supposed to look beautiful on the Dreamcast as well.
Yeah,
that version.
Yeah.
It's a shame, though, because, I mean, I remember that game getting really good reviews, and just looking now into it a bit more, apparently it only sold just over 28,000 copies and was actually... IGN awarded it the best game no one played award of the year. So what kind of went wrong with that then? Do you any insight?
Who was the publisher of that? Was it Crave?
Yeah, Crave Entertainment, yeah.
So I suspect it was probably down to them.
Must be a shame when you put all your heart and soul into it, though, yeah.
Well, it is, yeah. I mean, you hope everything you do is a hit, and then it's not. And then you go on to the next one. And I've talked to people who've had hits. I was lucky enough to spend some time with some of the guys at Rovio, because obviously with working with Housemarque over in Finland, we'd go out drinking and the Rovio guys would be there. And, you would talk to them about, did you know Angry Birds was going to be as big as it was? No, they didn't know. They all played it. Obviously, they knew it was a great game, but it was no different to the other 51 games they'd made prior to that. A hit comes from anywhere, and sometimes very hard to follow.
Yeah.
What was the game they did after Angry Birds? Do you remember?
No idea.
No one does. Bad Piggies, I think he was, and didn't do that. And same with Mojang. Look at a phenomenal game like Minecraft, but they're really hard to follow it up with anything. Scrolls didn't really. He struggled that tricky second album syndrome.
Yeah, it's interesting because you did like a variety of titles. So one was Tom and Jerry House Track, which really, really interesting because it had that kind of comic strip look where you had the top and the bottom of the screen split. And then it was like, instead of being 2D, it was 3D, but it had all those original Tom and Jerry assets and feel, and you had to like hunt each other on the game. That was a pretty unique one. Did you enjoy working on that?
Yeah, so for me, that was kind of the first game I could really dig my teeth into as a game designer. It was my kind of concept, and it's actually an homage to Spy versus Spy. Do you remember that game?
Yes. Yeah.
I used to love playing that game with my brother. It just one of those games you could just pick it up and just have a session on it really easily. And so because it meant so much, because I was so influenced by that, I wanted to do my version of it using Tom and Jerry. So you all the traps you set, the split screen, everything about it was kind of an homage to that game. So much so that I think First Star Software sent a writ to the publisher claiming we'd used the source code to the Spy versus Spy in the game. We hadn't. It was just it was a spiritual kind of homage. But yeah, in those days, it was hard to get footage to learn about. Because whenever I set about designing something, I like to really sort of immerse myself in the IP. Because I've worked on quite a few different licensed games, I like to really learn everything there is about it. So I had to go out and buy a Laserdisc player, because I don't think we had DVDs or anything in those days, and just bought a ton of Laserdisc copies of all the Tom and Jerry cartoons and watched every single episode and just tried to pull as much in as I could. It was a good, fun little game, and only a small team that made it.
Well, see, you're dealing with Warner Brothers one, you're doing stuff like Tiny Toon Adventures that you did, and Tom and Jerry as well. I mean, were there any like really strict requirements? Like, we've talked to people that have worked on Simpsons games, for example, and like, they're really tough about, the proportions of the hair and the eyes have got to be a certain distance apart. And obviously it's difficult to do on a computer screen as opposed to, television, for example. But how demanding were the requirements to fit their brand identity?
With things like Tiny Toons or Animaniacs, or Tom and Jerry, they weren't that bad. It was a lot more stringent when I did Harry Potter. It was less. I remember in Animaniacs, I wrote all of the scripts for all of the cutscenes, all the dialogue, and I learned a valuable lesson on how voice actors work. So one of the characters has like a German accent. So I'd written it phonetically with the accent in the script. And so it got sent off to a Warner Brothers professional script writer. And they did an edit to make sure it was in keeping with the IP. And when it came back, they changed all of the text to be just normal words. All of the phonetics had been taken out. So I thought, there's been a mistake here. So I put them all back in before the script went off to the voice actors. And I wasn't at the session, but our audio guy was. And he said the guy who does the voice was taking the mickey out of you, something wrong. Like I don't know how to voice the character I've voiced for all these years. Yeah, a bit embarrassed by that one. But yeah, Harry Potter was a bit more strict. That was, it hadn't quite reached its peak. I think the films were only on third or the fourth Goblet of Fire. I think the film that just came when we were working on it.
Well, when did you first get the rumblings that a takeover was approaching? And what did you think of the Gizmondo?
See, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Yeah, there's so many good stories that come from that. So we were starting to make redundancies. We'd just grown too big. We floated on the stock exchange. And when you do that, there's an expectation for growth, and we were showing no growth. We'd done some fairly big games, Mace Griffin and things like that, but they commercially not really sort of succeeded enough to sustain the studios. So we were hemorrhaging money, too many mouths to feed, too many studios had been acquired to try and form that growth for the stock exchange. So I started to make people redundant. And there was 3 rounds of redundancies. I was made redundant in the 3rd round. So they had me do 2 rounds and then chopped me. So I wasn't around for the Gizmondo takeover. I kind of, we had a bit of a tussle in court about, with lawyers about unfair dismissal and stuff like that. But I always stayed in touch with them, with all my friends there. And so I got to hear about what was happening with the Gizmondo. And there's some great, scary stories that came out of it. On the tech side, some of the decisions were crazy about, where the battery was, to where the chip was, to where the GPS was, and all these overheating issues. And the fact that when you plugged it in the wall, it drained the battery quicker than it could charge. And so I was finding all these little tidbits. But the one that worried me the most was when they missed payroll. And I think I went to E3, and one of the producers started to flash his wrist at me. I went, what's that? Do you like my Rolex? And when did you get that? Yeah, Gizmondo gave me because they missed payroll, so they just gave me to apologise. I went, hang on a minute, they missed payroll? How does a big $1 billion company miss payroll? And why are they trying to shut you up with a Rolex? That doesn't seem right.
Doesn't sound promising, that.
No. And then quite quickly it all started to spiral. I remember catching up with the FD at Warthog, and he told me a lovely story about he had done the same. He sent an email to Carl Freer saying, how have you missed payroll? What? This doesn't seem right. You're a big company, right? So he got called to Carl Freer's office in Sweden. And we had a small studio, ATOD, which was run by a guy. He was Asian, but he was Swedish, right? So he didn't look like he should be Swedish. He didn't look like, but he spoke fluent Swedish, right? So the 2 guys, they go to Carl Freer's office. He's in a big table, and as they shut the door and sit down, there's this massive, big, meaty guy sat at the door. Carl starts throwing these bits of paper at the FD. Don't send emails like this to me. Don't you ever send emails like this to me. If you've got a problem, you pick the phone up. And he just started to berate Simon about what he'd done. But the big monkey next to the door kept saying things to Carl in Swedish. So they finished the meeting. Simon's apologised. I'm sorry, I just wanted to know, whatever's gone wrong, we can fix it. And they left. The guy who was with him, who speaks fluent Swedish, later on said, do you know what the monkey was saying? You know what the big gorilla was saying? Do you want me to take them outside and sort them out? Do you want me to make this problem go away for you? Wow. So that's where the kind of the mafia connection, the gangster started. The week later, he got an invite from Carl Freer to go on his yacht He declined that.
Wow.
He said, I've watched the gangster films. I'm not getting a plastic bagpot on my head and a concrete overcoat.
Yeah, declining that, I think, was probably the wisest choice he ever made.
So at that point, you were like, right, I'm going to move into mobile gaming then. And
I'd already moved at that point. Yeah, I was spectating with
you were out,
yeah,
observing on the sidelines.
Yeah.
But that was a really interesting point as well, because Java had entered the mobile gaming area, and there was J2ME. Really interesting titles. And that's when I think mobile gaming kind of really grew up with its capabilities and what you could do with the handsets.
Yeah.
What was it like for you when you first stepped into that kind of area?
God, it was very different. It was a nightmare for us as developers. It was challenging and it was exciting. I mean, with iPhone with an F, the Mr. Trick there with the PH. I think someone else had the trademark on that. iPhone was run by one of the guys who founded Ocean, David Ward. And so we had great connections with Hasbro. So he brought all these Hasbro licenses with him. So we had this big war chest of cool stuff that we could do. Game of Life, Monopoly, Cluedo. We'd also managed to bag the Tetris license. We've managed to get Lemmings. So we had a ton of licenses. They were really exciting to work on. We did a deal with Sega, so we got to do the Rally. We got to do Choo Choo Rockets, Super
Virtua Tennis as well.
Virtua Tennis, Sonic.
Yeah.
So we're working on really amazing IP, but the actual process of developing it was really difficult. It wasn't like today where you'll just create one version and the manifest will work out how it should run on the different handsets. You had to create a bespoke version for like 300 different handsets. So you'd have like a low, a mid, and a high-end version. You'd always be working on 3 versions of the game, and then in between that, there'd be these kind of bespoke versions where certain screen sizes or certain texture sizes had to be used to fit it on the device. And because you were dealing with the operators, if you wanted to do a game, it had to be on the Nokia 3510i, because there's that many 3510i's out there. Even though it's only got 3 colours and a postage stamp screen, you would constantly try and negotiate these really bad handsets out, but they'd have none of it. There's a big family of handsets you would have to support to get your game up onto like Vodafone's platform. So it was quite challenging. iPhone had a really good set of programmers that had some great tools where I could give them versions and they'd create these bespoke versions. So I only really worried about the low, mid and high end versions. But it's tough.
One thing about phones of that era, that kind of, before the iPhone with a P kind of came along and took over, was the soundtracks to games as well. There's great polyphonic sounding Sonic the Hedgehog, which is a fantastic theme.
Yeah.
What was the process of making those then and translating video game music to polyphonic ringtones almost?
So we would always use a couple of different outsourcers who were really good at that side of things. I didn't need to get involved. I would give them the source material, and the little geniuses would come back with great sounding music. But always a love for that kind of thing. Still listen to that kind of music in my car. I have a couple of CDs with old school chip tunes on it. There's nothing quite like driving down listening to Last Ninja's soundtrack or Sankson and Delta and stuff like that.
I think that's awesome because after that, J2ME period, mobile gaming kind of blew up, and that really helped establish it and make it become a thing. And people take it seriously. And now the market is absolutely huge. But you ended up then going back to Sony.
I did, yeah.
As a senior producer. So how was it kind of going back to Sony after those years and the changes that had happened there?
It was exciting. I mean, Glue Mobile had come in and wanted to acquire iPhone. And that's when I first met Christian Sergestrahler. And he basically came in, they bought the studio, And of course, they measured on a map how far London was from Manchester. It's not that far. Everyone will move. Won't be a problem. Of course, nobody wanted to move to London. We're all quite happy in the Northwest doing what we do. So there's a lot of redundancies. And I'll never forget, because I've been through it at Warthog and I knew what it was like to be on the other side of the desk. He called me in to basically make me redundant. And he told me what the package was. And I said, that's brilliant. Where do I sign? He went, you're not going to shout at me. You're not going to have a go at me. Everyone else has had a go at me for coming in and shutting the studio down. I went, Christian, you're going to buy me a lovely plasma television. It's going to be fine. I'm sure I'll find another job. We're all right. Don't you worry. I'm not a problem. And I'd heard from a friend of mine who was a producer over at Sony that they were looking for more producers for PlayStation. So I went in and interviewed. And yeah, did probably one of the best interviews of my life. Got offered the job there and then. And it was brilliant. It was like the old days, but just a bit more. People were still trying to do brave, different things, but it was just a little bit more organised than before. Do you know what I mean? My friends from QA were still there, but yeah, my job was to try and create as many games for it was called the EDI, the Electronic Distribution Initiative. It became PSN eventually. So my job was to sign as many games as I could to make the PSN a mature look like a mature service at launch. Well, that's where I met my business partner, Leo. And together we ended up setting up Ripstone after 5 years. And I always joke, he was the external producer on Little Big Planet. Little Big Planet 1, Little Big Planet 2, Little Big Planet Vita. So we did 3 games in those 5 years. I think I did 25 or 26. But they were the little $5-6 download games where you could just do something a bit daft, a bit different. You were doing things for the sake of doing them rather than having to go to greenlight meetings every month because you're spending tens or even sometimes hundreds of millions making a real tentpole game. And you were kind of left alone to just do exciting stuff and find new stuff. I would always be up in front of the Sony board presenting the games I wanted to sign. I was kind of a regular fixture, so I got to know a lot of the higher ups, some of whom became a mentor for me later on when I set the company up. And that helped me with my presentational skills and, stand up on podiums and having to talk to people and things like that. But yeah, that's where I ended up working on Lemmings and games like Super Stardust. I
was going to say, tell us a bit more about Lemmings then, because obviously that's a classic Psygnosis franchise that they brought back for the PlayStation 3. Did you think you'd be like working on a classic like that for Sony's new Wonder console? No,
I didn't, especially after being the producer on the mobile version. But I'm really glad I did because Team 17 did the work. And that led me to become really good friends with the guys over there. Martin Brown, one of the founders, God rest his soul, he passed away recently. But Paul Kilburn, John Dennis, just became huge friends. Ended up, we would get together at all of the different events. I would always seek them out. So yeah, working on that game has helped me, build some fantastic memories.
What about Super Stardust HD then? So, I mean, I love the original on the Amiga back in the day. I mean, great kind of Asteroids clone. What was it like updating that then? And were you a fan of the original?
I was, although I'll be honest, I probably played more Alien Breed and games like that than I did Stardust. But it was Martin who said to me, you need to go and talk to these guys at Housemarque, because they'd had a relationship with them on the Amiga days. They said, they're great guys, really talented. They want to remake Stardust. We're not going to stand in your way. There's no IP kind of issues. It'd be a great game. And at the time, I was looking for what was Sony's answer to Geometry Wars. Huge fan of that game. I'd sunk so many hours into it.
That was massive as well.
Yeah, just wonderful kind of. They'd found just a really sticky experience, and I wanted to find Sony's answer to that. So if they were remaking, Blasteroids or whatever, mine was going to be Asteroids. It was going to be as Martin Brown once described it, asteroids are big hairy bollocks, Phil. And he was right, it was.
So, rave soundtrack.
Yeah.
So after Sony, you ended up founding Ripstone as well, and you talked about how some of those guys there helped mentor you in that process. What was it like, kind of founding your own company, but also what were the aims of what you wanted to do there?
Yeah, I mean, it's something I'd always wanted to do, and that journey. So we've been operating now for something like 14, maybe that's 15 years now, which I think it's quite an achievement because a lot of businesses, they fail pretty early, and the entire journey was very serendipitous, I think. You know, from the moment Leo and I had that water cooler moment, I think they call it, where the conversation moved towards, would you ever set a company up? Yeah, I'd love to set a company up. I've always wanted to do that. That's the dream. And Leo had experience. He'd run radio stations before he'd set businesses up himself. And I was just about to go on paternity with my youngest lad, Luke. So I said, well, yeah, I'd love to do it. Do you want me to put a business plan together? I think we could make these small games that I'm producing. They're getting no marketing because the way Sony was structured, all of the territories had their own marketing spend, but the digital games, all the revenue came through Central. So they weren't going to spend any money marketing it because they weren't going to see it on their bottom line. They weren't going to see any of the profits. And so they were selling really well with very little marketing. It was all organic. And I was bringing games to the table that I thought were going to make about $1 million, and it wasn't enough for Sony. They wanted games that were going to make more than that. And I get that. Of course they do. They want to make tens of millions. They want super hits. But I'm thinking that game could make $1 million. I think that game could probably make $1 million. And there's something in it for us. And there could be something in it for the game developer, because I was getting a bit disillusioned with the business model of the developer kind of getting stiffed. So their intellectual property would be taken off them, but also they would get sweated on an advance on royalty model. And the advance on royalty model, I believe, was invented by the music producers in the old days to con black artists out of their revenues. And the way it works is you get an advance. So let's say you get £1 million. That's an advance on the royalty rate of 30%. So 30 pence in every pound pays off the million. But remember, 70 pence is being kept. In fact, the whole pound's being kept by the person who gave you the million. To scale that down, the number of units that these people had to sell to just clear the money they'd been given to make the product in the first place, it was never going to make them any money. I would see a lot of people. I was out at every event talking to every developer, and they would all say royalties are a myth. I thought, I want to set a company up where they're not a myth, where it's a 100% recoup. So every pound is paying off all the money it took to make the game. And as soon as all the money's been made back and we're happy, it's wiped its face, we share revenue better. We do 50-50, we do 60-40 in their favour. Because they're the creators. They're the ones that you need to keep going. People like that need to be in a job, because otherwise we won't have any more games, will we? You know? So I set about creating this business model. And Leo went to parents' evening and got chatting to one of the parents. And he said, what do you do? Well, I'm a producer at Sony. He said, what I want to do, I want to set this business up. And this guy, Charlie used to be a record plugger back in the day. It was Charlie's fault that Wet stayed at the number one spot for as long as he did. He had a big army of kids that would go out and buy the records and keep them at number one.
14 weeks or something, wasn't it? Yeah.
So Charlie said, you should speak to my mate Will. He's in the film industry. He's looking for something to invest in. So I thought, well, all right then. So Leo came back. He said, I've got this contact. He's from the film industry, but I think we should go and meet them. And I'm thinking, well, I've got my presentation ready. I've got all my numbers. I know what I'm going to pitch. I'm thinking, film industry? What do they know about video games? We'll tell you what, Leo. We'll do it to this guy. We'll make a complete pig's ear of it. Don't worry, because we'll use this as a little kind of practice run for when we talk to the games people. So we turn up in Soho, at this chap's office. It turns out Will is a really big deal in the film industry. We didn't know it. He's a really big film producer. He'd give Shay Meadows his break. He'd funded Dead Man's Shoes. He'd done a lot of good films. He had the rights to stuff, Hurt Locker and stuff like that. And on his desk, he had a copy of Edge magazine, which had Little Big Planet on the cover, and an interview with me on page 30. As far as he was concerned, the two biggest experts in the games industry were sat to him, pitching a business plan. And he'd just sold his company to Canal Plus. His company's called Optimum Releasing. And he sold his company to Canal Plus, and he was exiting. And him and his friends who'd invested in Optimum were looking for something else to put money into as a tax break, as just a way of minimising their tax bill. And maybe making some money in the future. And so he looked at this business plan, and it was very similar to how he approached filmmaking. He didn't understand how you made games, but he understood how he wanted the finances to work. So at the end of the meeting, he said, "I'm in. I'll invest. I want you to meet my money man." So we kind of walking out of this office in Soho, looking at each other thinking, well, that one didn't go the way we thought it would. And then we met his money man, a lovely man called Paul Higgins, sadly not with us anymore, a serial entrepreneur. And I remember we were in a place called Bob Ricard's in London, which is like a bar and restaurant, but it's all done out like old classic train carriages and train seats. And I opened the laptop up to give him the same pitch, and he just shut the laptop and just went, "Just tell me about you. I just want to know about you, your kids, family, who you are. I'm invested in you. I'm not Will already says this plan's great. I want to know about you." And we came out with the investment. What we thought was the investment we needed, which was £1 million. And Leo said halfway through he wanted to press the button. So there's a button that said "press for champagne." He doesn't wait to hit the button all the way through. Well, we ended up. Yeah. They put some money in, we put some money in, and then their friends topped it all up to $1 million. And then we set about investing in games. We invested in Knit Underground with Nicholas. We did Stick It to the Man with Klaus, and a few other titles. One
that I want to talk about, because I was actually playing this on my Nintendo Switch on holiday last week. On the balcony in Spain, Pure Pool, which, I love pool games, even going back to like Archer McLean's Pool on the Amiga back in the day, and Pure Pool, if anyone hasn't played that, it's by far my favourite pool simulator on modern platforms. And actually, you're going to be doing a follow-up to that soon, aren't you? Pure Pool Pro.
We are.
Tell us a bit more about this thing, 'cause I'm very excited about this.
Yeah, so Pure Pool came about. So one of the titles I did on PlayStation 3 at Sony was Hustle Kings, with a company called Vufu. Great lads, really talented. Only a small, 3 or 4 man outfit at the time. But the guy who ran it, Mark Williams, really clever guy. He was ray tracing on a PlayStation 3, believe it or not. So on Hustle Kings, the balls are just flat 2D spheres, but they're ray traced to make them look like spheres. We didn't know what ray tracing was. It wasn't a buzzword, so I kind of ignored it. When I set Ripstone up, I approached those guys and said, "I'd like to do a chess game. There aren't any chess games on PlayStation 3. I think we could do like the Marks and Spencers or the Waitrose equivalent, something really beautiful. Kind of, when you all got the DVD players in the old days, you'd put like the fireplace or the aquarium DVD.
Yeah.
And then you started to see reference DVDs. When I got my first surround sound, I think there was one particular film that we'd always put on because it fired the sound all around. I said I wanted to be kind of a reference game that people kind of use as a benchmark to show what a PlayStation can do. And I think someone described it as the Gran Turismo of chess games, which I thought was quite nice of them. So once we finished Pure Chess and it'd done really well, and we put out a handheld version of it and ported it over to various platforms, I wanted to do a couple more games with him. And because we'd had such a great time making Hustle King, I said, why don't we do a pool game? Same approach, make it as beautiful as we can, really pure, very little UI, just make it all about the game. So we did pure pool, and we did a poker game as well, pure Hold'em. And pure pool by far and away was our one of our biggest hits. It returned so much in terms of revenue. It was wonderful. It allowed us to hire Mark. He now works for us. He closed Boo down. And after we've done various games recently, we did Queen's Gambit for Netflix. We finished off a Chess Infinity. We were looking about what should we do next, and we thought, well, why don't Pure Pool doesn't appear on PlayStation 5. Why don't we set about recreating it for this generation, for PS5, PS5 Pro, and for RTX cards? And so I sat down with Mark, and Pure Pool Pro started to form with the goal of being able to render it natively in 8K.
It looks stunning. I mean, I'm looking at some screenshots. I mean, the balls almost look like photorealistic. It's like incredible.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to achieve now. Is that every part of that game, I want it structurally. It's not going to be too dissimilar to Pure Pool, because I don't want to move it too far away from what people loved about it. But visually, there's going to be new environments. Lighting, all the reflections are going to be revamped. And it's. I hope people are going to be able to say it's hard to determine what's real and what's game.
Well, I'll put the you can wishlist it on Steam now. So I'll put the link in the show notes as well, and the trailer and the screenshots looks amazing. Any idea on a release date? Is it due soon, or you thinking this year?
I don't know about that. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. I can't. If I knew, I couldn't tell you. And I'll be honest, I don't know.
Right,
speaking of video games, when you've got these heady goals, deadlines just seem to whiz by, right? So I don't want to commit to anything. We keep slipping it because we hit various snags. So our Liverpool studio, they specialise in Unreal Engine. So a lot of what we do, we build it in Unreal. But Pure Pool, it's a custom engine. It's built specifically really to do the task of pool, which is why we're going to be able to do it in 8K native, 4K 120. There'll be no upscaling. So taking the assets we build in Unreal and the lighting that we try and perfect, and taking that over to the custom engine doesn't always go as smoothly as you'd like. Unreal engines can be a bit of a black box sometimes with things. But at the moment, I'm working on the post-launch stuff, so I'm hoping we're going to be able to put some leagues in there. So a nice, sticky, year-long rotating set of 3 league events. So I'm currently designing that up. And it'd be nice to have, if you're a fan of it, nice to have you in the closed beta when that's ready as well.
Oh, yeah. 100%. Love to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, best of luck with that, Phil, and everything else you got going on. Obviously, like I said, I'll link the Steam page so people can wishlist it in the show notes as well. It has been amazing to talk to you and hear some of the incredible highlights from your career. So thanks again for coming on and being our guest this week.
Well, thanks for inviting me. It's been fun. Thanks.